Well, hello and welcome to our third episode of Women's Health. And today we're going to be discussing early signs of perimenopause. So let's just go into definitions. If you follow this long enough, you know I like definitions and going into Latin. Um, it makes things a lot easier. So they used to actually teach Latin in pharmacy school and med school, and now I'm surprised how many doctors and how many pharmacists have no idea what certain words mean in Latin. And really, in order to know science, you need to know Latin. So, perimenopause. What does perimenopause literally mean? Peri means around. So, and menopause, what does that really mean? Meno, meaning menses, or women cycling. Pause, obviously, that one should be pretty obvious. Your cycles begin to pause. So, perimenopause is just that. Usually, the first sign of perimenopause is you might miss a cycle or they become more irregular. Jan, explain what those things could, how those things could manifest.
Just to back up a little bit about perimenopause is that really your ovaries are either working really well or very sporadic. So it's not 100% consistent. If you were someone who is cycling very regular, it's starting to change slightly or very significantly. And each woman's passage is different. However, I think the first sign would probably be the cycle. I don't really feel like for myself that was the truth. I felt like I was very consistent with my cycles after having children, but some of the things that started creeping up for me were other symptoms, like I wasn't sleeping as well. So sometimes we focus on, you know, how that day, 1 through 25 was of our menstrual cycle versus thinking about some other symptoms that start creeping up. And for me, I think one of the first signs was I was not getting the REM sleep that I needed. So I'd wake up exhausted. So I think that is probably one of the things that's missed a lot. And when we talk about women wanting to know what labs they should do. Well, I don't really think a lab is going to significantly change per se. It might show on maybe your progesterone level, but I think symptoms are really undervalued. So if you're someone who, for example, and Shawn will probably speak to this, I do not like getting up in the middle of the night ever. In fact, that's
No,
something
no.
I told my children when they were younger and had little friends over. Do not wake up Mrs. Needham in the middle of the night by being loud. You do not want to meet her then. And they'd look at me like, oh, but seriously, I do not like waking up. So for me, it was just the subtle things of not sleeping as sound, waking up. I didn't initially have a lot of hot flashes during this time frame. They did come later. So I really think sleep is the first symptom.
Yeah, it sure could be. There's other symptoms that
Yep.
can manifest also. I want to back up a little bit because I we kind of missed something, or I want to give some details on episode 2 when we talked about during pregnancy.
Mm.
So on episode 2, Janet talked about the importance of not taking drugs when you're pregnant. And I'm going to say this: there are a lot of vaccines that are recommended during pregnancy now. Um, and one of them is the COVID-19 vaccine. And we absolutely do not recommend you take that when you're pregnant. It has never been proven safe and effective, actually, for humans at all, let alone for a pregnant woman. That being said, there's a few other vaccines they recommend. This is post when Janet had and us had kids, 25 years ago. There's routine vaccines they give pregnant women now. Other ones, I don't remember what they are, don't care. I will tell you this, that you're not going to die of a vaccine related disease while you're pregnant. So I would not take any vaccine while you're pregnant. And that being said, after you deliver your baby, the first thing they want to do is they want to shoot them full of a bunch of vaccines. I want you to do your own research. Here's what I would suggest: do not let them give anything to your baby after it is born. Okay. God designed your baby wonderfully, okay? It doesn't need anything to be injected into it, whether it be vitamin K, whether it be erythromycin eye drops, whether it be vaccines. It is up to you to tell them that. A lot of times there are informed consent things that you sign that you just waive those rights. Don't do that. You let them know you don't want your baby to be given anything um, outside of your knowledge. And I wouldn't give them any injections unless absolutely necessary to support their life. Vaccines and vitamin K are not one of them. Here's another thing too. I would suggest that after your baby is born, it stays with you. Splitting your baby up in a nursery, sending it off to a nursery to be taken care of by a nurse right after birth is almost barbaric. And we've been doing it for decades. A baby should not be split up from its mother right after birth. So that's what I wanted
I
to go back on. And Janet, you can go
Sure.
ahead and hit on that.
No, I agree with that. In fact, Shawn and I talk about this even after, parenting children when people gave us all kinds of advice, and our both of our kids went through different transitions differently. You can't put them in the same mold. So just be realistic that, not everybody has all the advice that's really going to be fitting for you. So just, take advice, listen, and then apply what's best for you. And I think that's true about parenting and raising children. Where we start going down this slippery slope is that we take for granted that the person in front of us, whether it be a healthcare provider, our mothers, and other people in our lives, friends, you name it, have the answer. Maybe for them they did, but it may not apply to you. So just realize that you have to make the decision for your own self, your family, and your own body and your relationship. And looking back, I think that's the strongest point that I can tell people is that find what works for you and stick with it, and don't feel like you're judged even if they are judging you. It's your family that comes first, your husband and your children and yourself. Do not get out of that paradigm. And that really starts even as we go. I mean, this episode is supposed to be about perimenopause, but many times we are still raising children in the house when we do have perimenopause, which is very exciting because a lot of times our kids are teenagers.
Yeah, that's true. And back on the topic of how to diagnose perimenopause, it can be very difficult.
It can be.
Like Janet said, it's mostly symptoms. There's some labs you can do.
Sure.
They talk about FSH, LH, maybe check progesterone level or check your hormone levels. I will say this. The problem with perimenopause in checking your levels of hormones is your levels are all
Right.
over the board. I mean, they are everywhere. So one day you might have them, you do the lab and think, well, I don't know. I mean, Mrs. Needham, your hormones are just fine. And the next day you feel like crap and your hormones aren't fine. So I don't even know how necessary it is to really check labs. You go on symptoms. So if your cycles start becoming more irregular, or you start having sleep issues, you start having decreased libido, then those could be symptoms of perimenopause.
So there are some things though that I find very helpful if you are going to do labs. One, I want to know what your vitamin D level is because vitamin D is very close to a hormonal structure. We call it a vitamin, but I think it should really be a hormone. It's
It is a hormone.
right. It's super important to our thyroid gland. It's important to our other hormones as well as our immune system. And why we keep hitting the immune system is because many times in our life we have so many things thrown at us. So whether we have, an organism like a flu bug or a bacteria, or it's just our hormones are unbalanced, our body needs the nutrients to handle that. Um, Another crucial point would be if we are at perimenopause or even younger in life for that matter. You know, I don't care how old we are, until we die, we have bones. They are still important no matter what stage of life we are at. So, one of the crucial things that I think that happens is that our culture has already taught us to eat poorly, sleep poorly, eat
Don't
poorly,
move.
don't move, right?
Mhm.
And so we come to this position where we stop making the hormones that actually build our our body, our joints, our bones, and our muscles. and they're kind of at a standstill. So probably one of the most inexpensive things that you could do is get on vitamin D3, because that's potentially going to save your bones and also help you maybe with an infection down the road, or many other things, because that's really a marker of health. That's just one of the things. The other thing might be, you might want to know, because this is a big issue with perimenopause, and probably many women could have been saved a lot of heartache in this transition, is not just is our progesterone, what helps us sleep, is off, and our REM sleep's off, but we start dropping in hormones like testosterone. And testosterone's a big myth out there. Like, women don't need testosterone. Well, that's not true. We've always made testosterone from the time we were delivered. And testosterone does a lot for us, for women. It helps with our lean muscle mass. I'm not talking about bulking like bodybuilders or anything strange like that. It just helps us with our muscle mass. And why is that important? Because lean muscle burns energy, so it helps our metabolism. It also builds bones, which is super, super important, as well as our joints and our connective tissue. And here's one of the biggest bummers about this whole transition that I see on a daily basis in our pharmacy. Yes, it is important to all these other things as far as our brain health and sleep. But what about our feelings as a woman towards sex and libido? And here's where the crux starts happening in our lives, is that many women in this transition end up divorced. And I'm not judging, I'm just talking about it, because this becomes a big problem. There's lots of things that are happening, whether balancing a career, taking care of teenagers, you might be taking care of a parent or helping a parent in a situation. So there's lots of stresses in our life and in our society today. But one of the biggest problems is, if you don't have any connection between your partner, it's a problem. And what I usually bring out to women and talk to them about is this. You know, Looking at your testosterone levels in a lab might be really important, especially the free testosterone, and how you were thinking about your sexual relationship with your partner or your husband, because it's a form of communication. If you don't have communication at this level in your relationship, it spells a problem. You will deal with it one way or the other. And I'm not being judgmental. I'm just saying it's a reality. And I really feel at this stage, if many women would be helped in this fashion, not only their overall health, but their mental health and also their relationship, because really that's one of the important parts in a dynamic as you're raising teenagers and transitioning in life, to keep that bond between you and your husband. And it's not, our culture sells sex in a relationship as bad and evil and taboo, and you don't talk about it. But I really think this hits the wall at perimenopause. I think maybe while we're having children, we can understand when the little ones are up and she's tired and things like that. But there's this transition that starts happening, and you're going to transition into, your children have left the house, right? You're not going to always have them in the house, and that relationship still needs to continue. So it's super important, folks. And women, don't let anybody sell you short. Intimacy is a part of our life that we should embrace and enjoy. And if you have low testosterone, odds are you're not.
And let's just back up on that. I meant to mention in episode 2 about postpartum depression. Testosterone is a mood elevator also.
Totally.
And many women postpartum, their testosterone drops off. And a lot of women feel great when they're pregnant because their hormones are super high, whether it be testosterone, whether it be progesterone. And then when it drops off, they can get depressed. So you might need testosterone even right after postpartum.
Unless you're nursing, don't take it.
Yeah. Although there's been many studies out there to show that testosterone is not harmful during nursing. There's a lot of studies, and if you think about it, testosterone is a natural hormone anyway. So you do want to be careful if you're applying a cream, testosterone, to make sure that that cream is not going to rub off on your baby. That's for sure, because you don't want them to get it. But get it on their skin, but in the breast milk, it's probably not going to be a big issue at all, because they're already going to be there. Another thing is too, on vitamin D, pre-pregnancy, during pregnancy, postpartum, not just perimenopause. Vitamin D, vitamin D, vitamin D, all the time. Vitamin D3, not vitamin D2. There's a prescription vitamin D2 that you can take once a week. Don't do it. The active form of vitamin D3 is vitamin D3, the active form, cholecalciferol, and you need between 5 and 10,000 units a day. You can get that through sunlight, but most of us aren't out in the sun enough. And when we are, we cover up or wear sunscreen. That's a topic for a whole nother episode. Or we live in northern latitudes where you don't get the direct sun rays to affect enough of your skin to produce vitamin D. So vitamin D, like Janet says, has a cholesterol backbone. It's a hormone itself, so it's super important during all periods. There's one supplement you can take. It's probably vitamin D3 because everybody's low in it, especially in northern latitudes and especially in the winter. Fast forward to the labs that we're talking about checking. Realize that your symptoms are more important than any fancy labs. So realize that it's important to talk about those symptoms. It's important to talk about sex. And if you have a doctor that says as you get older, because perimenopause usually happens, everybody's different, but mid 40s, let's say, perimenopause starts happening. You might have some PMS that goes along with it. And PMS can even be earlier, but that's usually a sign of low progesterone. Also, anytime something follows your cycle, it's low progesterone. So progesterone can help for PMS possibly too. But if you go to a doctor and he or she says that as we age, sex is not as important, get a new doctor.
Well, and let's remember too that the other thing they're going to tell you is you need to be on the birth control pill.
Yep.
That's one of the big fallacies.
Nope.
So Shawn and I are really opposed, and I am super opposed to the idea at Perry that I should give estrogen. Very rarely do we do or suggest it. Because your ovaries are going to work one day and then they're not, and you probably have storage. So we don't go that route. We go with testosterone and progesterone. But in the light of synthetic estrogens, talk to that a little bit, Shawn, because I think a lot of women at this stage get the pill.
Yeah. So there's kind of a joke in women's health that if they're less than 40 and having any kind of hormonal problems, we give them the birth control pill. Mm-hmm. If they're over 40 and they're having any kind of birth control, any kind of hormone problems, we give them a hysterectomy. We just take out their parts. And both those are just stupid ideas. So first of all, the birth control pill is typically a combination of synthetic estrogens, so like ethinyl estradiol, not bioidentical estrogen like estradiol. Bioidentical. What does bioidentical mean? Bio meaning life, back to Latin. Bio meaning life, identical to what's in our body. Okay. Same thing when we talk about testosterone. The testosterone we give women is bioidentical. It's not a synthetic type testosterone. So ethinyl estradiol, the estrogen in birth control pills, is not the same as what our body makes up. They're synthetic estrogens. They cause all kinds of problems, including blood clots, and which can result in pulmonary embolisms, can result in strokes, can result in cardiovascular accident or heart attack. And then there's sometimes usually a second ingredient, or sometimes only a second ingredient, which is a synthetic progestin. Okay. Synthetic progestin typically gets compared to progesterone. Remember in episode 2, we talked about progesterone. What does progesterone mean? Progestation, support a pregnancy. What do synthetic progestins do? They are birth control pills. They prevent a pregnancy. They are not the same. Most doctors, most pharmacists, they don't understand that. They have no idea. They are ignorant about that. That's how different they are. They are largely different.
So here's the problem with this. If we're lacking sleep and our REM sleep's not happening, we're not repairing. Our brains are foggy because we're not fixing that and cleaning out our brain as we sleep at night, and we're not repairing our body because generic or birth control pills that are progestins are not the same as a real progesterone, which our body would normally make, which is responsible for REM sleep. REM sleep is crucial.
And basically what synthetic birth control pills do, synthetic hormones like birth control pills, what they do is they actually artificially stop your body from producing their own hormones. So
It
you're
puts
already
you in menopause.
right. They put you in menopause, literally. So you already lack progesterone. We're going to stop you from producing more progesterone. It's going to make the problems worse. Now, it might regulate your cycles
Right.
short term, but long term, it's a problem. It's a big problem. And what happens when you put yourself into menopause early? Whether it be a hysterectomy, a complete hysterectomy, where you lose your ovaries, we'll talk about that in another episode. But you know, hormones make your bones strong, make your heart strong, make your lean body mass grow. Um, those things are real as we age. Sarcopenia or lack of flesh in our muscle is a problem. Osteopenia or osteoporosis for women, strong bones is a problem.
Right.
Birth control pills stop that stuff from happening. Don't
So,
take them.
right. So maybe in our first episode we didn't explain this. I'm not sure. I don't remember. But off the top of my head, I just thought about this that we need to clarify. A hormone actually is a messenger. It's not always about reproduction. Sure, it has a
Yeah.
major role. I don't deny that. However, it doesn't stop at just our ovaries or our testes in a male. It has to do with other functions in our body. And those cell receptors that receive the message from a hormone are everywhere. They're in our brain, they're in our skin, they're in our vessels, they're everywhere. So to think that just giving you something that puts you in menopause is going to help actually really causes more problems than it you might feel relief for a certain amount of time until you start having hot flashes or things like that. But let's be real, those bones are still there, and you're going to have bones for the rest of your life. Your brain is still there, and hopefully you're going to be able to use your brain and keep your cognition and be as optimal and perform throughout your life, right? Perry shouldn't start changing that for you, and don't allow them to tell you that. And the other place that it goes, and women during Perry start having hot flashes, is they start prescribing things like gabapentin
Or
and
effexor.
Wellbrutin
Or
or
effexor.
Effexor. And you know what, folks? You're not depressed.
And you
You're
don't,
not having seizures.
your body doesn't lack those drugs.
No.
You don't have a deficiency of
If
effexor.
you're having hot flashes, it's because you don't have the hormones in your body to help with that. And that's why we talk about balancing them and maybe looking at them. But yes, we don't always give estrogen in this case, but there's things like testosterone will help, progesterone will help, sleeping will help. There's nutrients like, or even herbal products like black cohosh that will help. But folks, do not if your doctor prescribes gabapentin or Effexor for your hormones,
Get a new doctor. Just
just
period.
leave.
Yeah. Just don't.
I
Don't.
know it's a standard of practice, but standard of practice does not equate
To quality.
quality.
No.
Hmm.
No. And,
Frightening.
and let's back up a little bit when it comes to, because a lot of times birth control pills, I don't think we touched on this on episode 1 or 2, but you probably know by now that Janet and I are not a fan of birth control pills, another class of drugs I would never ever recommend. And so what do you do, especially during the perimenopause age, for
Birth control.
birth control? So that's a pretty easy one. So hopefully you're in a committed relationship, and if that's the case, I always ask this. It does no good to check your hormone levels or to give you hormones, bioidentical hormones, when you're on birth control pills. It's a waste of resources. Just don't do it. And there's a lot of doctors that do it, and I think it's just pure ignorance.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be done. So, because those things suppress your own endogenous production of hormones. So why not go off of them to check where your hormones are really at and give you bioidentical hormones? That being said, the answer for birth control is, it's a pretty easy process for the husband to get a vasectomy. That's the easiest way. And here's what you as women need to do when your husband is too much of a sissy to get a vasectomy. You need to tell him that's great. Then you just won't have sex with me. Seriously, it's that serious. Don't go in and get a tubal ligation because he's too much of a sissy to go and get a vasectomy. Go and have him get a vasectomy. It's a outpatient procedure, super easy procedure that can be done inside the doctor's office.
So, oh gosh, I could spend all day on perimenopause, which is kind of a really hard topic because um, that's when I see majority of my clients, and I've had several that have went into their primary, and their primary is like you need antipsychotics or you need antidepressants, and again, it really probably boils down to really they just need to sleep and a sleep pattern. I mean, because we will die without sleep before anything else. So progesterone's huge in that, but there's other things that I think can be very helpful. And
Let me just touch on that. We'll die without blood before we die without sleep.
well,
We'll die
true,
without water before we die without sleep.
true,
But we
yeah,
won't. We can die from sleep before we'll die without food and before we'll die without
right.
exercise.
But let's be honest. Exercise and diet are super important. So here's a question that has been thrown at us: how should I exercise differently than Shawn? Well, I don't know if you've seen Shawn, but I'm not going to exercise 100% like Shawn.
Yeah, but that is
Like, but let me back up. So you start exercising at where you are, and
I
then
see.
you build on it
Yeah.
because your bones are still going to be with you as you age. So I always start with recommending weight bearing exercises. And to think that women have to go to the gym and lift like my son that is deadlifting 485 at
7
600 is
times.
just crazy. No, I'm not talking about that. What I'm saying is start where you are and build. And where I think it's super important is you do need to have resistance training. You do need to have weight opposing you, but do it at your level. And anything is better than nothing. Start at where you are at and build
And then progress.
and progress. And the other position that I really tell women that's super important, I've experienced it. I have a huge family. You know, my dad had 9 siblings, my mom had 15. So talking to my family as my family's age, especially the women, one of the things that my cousin Sandy shared is that you start having subtle balance changes. And I believe what happens, and what I would say for myself, is your core is not as strong as it should be. So you really need to focus on exercises that help you with balance. I can't stress that enough because you don't want to fall after menopause, right? You don't want to do that. You want to keep your core as healthy as you can. So start where you are, make resistance training important, and you don't have to have a lot. You don't have to even go to a gym. There's so many programs out there. Find something that applies, but do something every day if you can. Shawn and I probably have what, maybe 2 days, 1 day off a week, but resistance training is at least 3 or 4 days a week,
No,
depending.
2 to 3 probably,
But
depend on the season.
But the other place too that helps with the core, and I can't stress this enough, you do have to stretch. I mean, this is something that's been thrown to the, you don't need to do that. That's not true. It's not true. We need to stretch. So walking helps with that and doing stretching exercises. I can't give enough support to that, but do something. If you're not going to do anything, start with something. Don't give yourself an excuse. There's never a day that's too late. Start today. And I feel like you build on it. Now, I don't I don't necessarily like like to totally distinguish men and women on the importance of exercise. I think we all need some form of exercise in our life, no matter if you're a male or a female. I just think that we have kind of lost the fact that we try to equate each other. So yeah, Shawn might do a program and I might do the same thing, but it might be at a different level, and that's okay. But you're still doing something. I think that's the point. Move.
And it can start out with just for resistance training. It can start out with just body weight stuff, body weight
Bands.
squats, bands. You can use bands. You can add weight later
Right.
if you want. But if you're starting from nothing, just go to something. And then I do think that it's the importance of cardiorespiratory training.
Very true.
We've had a podcast on this subject just a few weeks back, and um, It's very important. I just say it's important as we age, or all the time, when we're young or we're old, to be
Every
strong
level.
and fast. So you don't get fast by just going to the gym and lifting weights. You've got to ride a bike, you've got to sprint, you've got to run, you've got to, and you can do that in short intervals. You don't have to do it for hours at a time. Um, but strong and fast. We are designed to be strong and fast. And Janet talked about the importance of balance and resistance training. So resistance training builds strength and balance, actually. But the three things that are important as we age is strength, mobility, and balance. When you don't have any one of those, that's when you start having problems falling down. Think about it. If you're mobile, you can walk. If you're strong, then you can lift things. If you have balance, then you can walk without falling. So, practice things that help that. One-legged exercise are great for one-legged squats are great for mobility, strength, and balance all in one. So, and as we back up on, I want to back up on what Janet says about, doing workouts with me. Um, it's just that I progress more than she has because I work out more than she does. It doesn't, and as men and women, we are different. Janet will never be able to as strong as me. It's what testosterone does to make us different as a man. Um, Also, recovery. Testosterone helps us with recovery, so men can usually recover better than women can. So don't feel discouraged because you can't go as fast or you can't lift as much as a man. That's just by design.
So the issue of exercise to me is foundation of health physically, but it also brings a foundation of health for your emotions and mentally. And this is where I think women are challenged, especially during perimenopause, is that we live in a culture, and some women buy into this more than others, that, you have to be the perfect mom or the perfect wife, and you work and you have a profession and you have a home, and all these things come tied together. And then now physically we are going through a transition. So, what I would say to you is this: let go of things that don't matter. Find those things that don't matter and let go of them. Also, find a space where you can deal with your emotions, also with your stress of the day. We haven't really talked about this in our podcast a lot at this until this point, but the hormone cortisol is extremely important. Cortisol is the primary hormone that we need to survive. Without it, we're not going to survive very long, and chronic diseases will start creeping in. But where cortisol starts getting off in perimenopause is our sleep cycle. So we don't have enough melatonin or progesterone on board, and so we don't get our REM sleep, and then our cortisol is off. So we might wake up, maybe still tired, but we still wake up and we get through halfway through the day and then we crash. So what we do in our society, and I've just been as guilty as any other woman, is we grab our caffeine and our sugar. Don't do that. Probably the best answer would be, and we were at a conference and I love this term, is an exercise snack. So really what we should do is move. And probably the best thing is, and not everybody has this option, I realize that, but if you can get up and move for a certain amount of time, just really shortly, you're going to get your blood flow and you're going to be able to change things in a small way. But ultimately, you have to find a place where you can deal with your stress. And I think exercise does that for you, sleep does that. But sometimes I think we forget about nature. I mean, Shawn and I went for a drive yesterday. The most beautiful experience is to see nature sometimes as it's unfolding in the fall. It was just absolutely gorgeous. You relax, you breathe. I mean, small things: go to the park, go outside, get out there
Nature
and
therapy.
take that in, because sometimes the biggest problems that we think, and we just keep going over and over in our brain, seem to be solved when we actually find some simple enjoyment. It could be as small as this. Shawn and I love having coffee in the morning and the weekend just in our screened-in porch, because we can see, especially, it doesn't matter what time of year, right? We can see nature. We can see the sun. Just do small things like that, because we were meant to be in the environment we live in, which does mean in nature. And I know they sound kind of quirky because we're, in healthcare, but those things are lost, I think, in our
That's so
society.
important. Better than
And
any
that,
drug.
right, you can't replace what happens when all your senses, your eyes, your smell, your touch, and you're able to physically relax. So find that, whether it's maybe music, meditation, yoga, going outside, something has to happen, because then you are in your
Yoga
own
outside
space.
to music.
Right. But then you're in your space and you're handling things in a healthy environment and way.
And realize this too, that a good friend once told me, Janet talked about, don't sweat the small stuff or something
Sure.
like that. Let me tell you this. After being on this planet for 53 years, almost 54 years, and raising two wonderful young men and being married for almost 30 years, don't sweat the small stuff, and everything's the small stuff. Seriously. I mean, it just seriously. And back on the cortisol, just a little bit of science behind it so you can understand what the cortisol is. Cortisol is actually a hormone um, that is related to stress produced in our adrenal glands in response to stress. Should be highest in the morning to prepare us for the day, physical and mental stressors. And then it should go down slowly throughout the day, being lowest at like 2 o'clock in the morning when we should be sleeping.
Mhm.
And it's inversely proportional to melatonin. So melatonin should be high at night, cortisol should be low at night. And if that's not, then it's going to disrupt your sleep and it's going to screw up everything.
Mhm.
There are supplements you can take. There's no doubt about it to help normalize your cortisol level. But I will tell you this, lifestyle is more important than any supplement. You
Yep.
can't supplement your way out of a bad diet.
No.
You can't supplement your way out of poor sleep habits. Okay. So the most important thing to get your stress hormones under control is sleep. We talked
Right.
about that over and over. Let me also back up on this. What does genetics have to do with overall perimenopause or menopause? So we already talked about the things that we can do in our environment: sleep, exercise, nature therapy, a diet, all those good things, right? So do genetics play a role in when we go through perimenopause? Do genetics play a role when we go into menopause? Genetics might play a role in a little bit of everything, but here's what I got to say. We can't change our genetics, but we can change the way our genes are expressed.
Sure.
Do you think the epidemic of obesity in America was caused from last generation or the generation before? Was it genetics? No. Genetics don't change in two generations. You look at my grandfather and their peers. You did not see a lot of obese people. Genetics don't change in two generations. You change your health by your lifestyle largely. So there again, genetics matter, but not nearly as
No.
important as epigenetics, which is what we do around ourselves and our lifestyle.
So there are some supplements that I do recommend very commonly, and this would be one that you probably would want to test before doing it. And the reason I say that is because my DHEA has always been super high. It still is. I don't supplement with DHEA. But DHEA is actually a hormone, and it supports our adrenal glands so that way our adrenal glands can release the cortisol that it needs to. So that also helps with your lipid panels. I'm not a huge follower of that, but I do think that there is some importance to that. And if you can support your adrenal glands, I think that's great. For women that are low, I usually recommend 5 to 10 milligrams, sometimes up to 25. But it also is a marker as how we age. So people that age quick or faster have lower DHEA. They also have a inverse proportion to their lipid panels. So people that have tendency to have low DHA have worse triglycerides and cholesterol panels. Not that I've bought into that whole 100%, but I think there is some power to that. And I also think, we talked about progesterone, that is a prescription, but that also helps support adrenal glands. And if I have someone who needs support, whether they're high or low, there are some great products out there. We carry orthomolecular We have adaptanol, adrenal, and then if you
True
are
Adapt.
right. So there are some things to help, but they don't trump lifestyle in any shape, way, or form.
Nope.
There is sometimes where occasionally we'll have somebody on cortisol for a short period of time, but then again, there's a reason you're ending up in that position. So that's super important. Um, if I would say to any woman too, if you're having the fluctuations of sleep and cortisol and you're craving sugar, don't do the sugar. Eat as much real protein as you can. I can't stress that enough because that sugar is adding to the fuel as we become more insulin resistant and we aren't able to bring in the nutrients that our body needs and we keep having cravings and stressors that's going to keep that cycle going. So resist that. And I have watched so many women in our culture do this. We wake up and we have tons of caffeine, tons of sugar, and then we have other carbs throughout the day. And I'm not saying that carbs aren't important at certain particular time, but this would be a time that I would say make protein a huge part of your life. Make sure you have them every day.
As always. But so, Janet, where do you find a good doctor or healthcare
Mm,
provider to prescribe hormones if you need it, or to deal with perimenopause if you
right,
need it?
right. So first of all, if you go in and they want to give you the pill or they want to put you on an antipsychotic or they want to put you on an antidepressant or they want to give you an ablation or some physical procedure, run,
Yeah. Get a new doctor.
run. Um, and I'm serious because some of these things can be very harmful in the end.
And it can't be reversed.
No, right. Don't be pressured. Look, research. So many times, if you are trying to look for somebody, and they may not have all the right answers for you, but many times, what we really recommend to people is somebody who is specialized in hormone replacement, who's had the training. They're just not, Shawn and I run across people that are just transitioning, and I'm not saying they're bad or good, but it may take them a little bit of time. So it might be prudent to ask them how long they've been practicing and don't go to a place, and this is me talking, I don't know how Shawn feels about this, but don't go to a place that the first thing they want to do is some form of a procedure and putting some pellets in you. I don't believe that's the first answer. I think we need to sit down and communicate what our needs and values are together as a patient and a provider and work together on that. But really, you want to find somebody who's been trained in practicing in hormone replacement for a while.
And we refer people all the time through our
Correct.
pharmacy at places all over the nation. So I'm going to say this too, and this is going to be not popular with some people, but don't go to a provider that bills insurance.
That's a good point.
Why do I say that? Well, if you go to a provider that bills insurance, they work for the insurance company. They don't
That's
work
right.
for you. The insurance company is who's paying them. So they love doing procedures where they can make money on them, whether it be diagnostics you don't need, whether it be labs you don't need, whether it be an ablation or a hysterectomy you don't need, because they make money on them.
That's true.
You want to go to somebody that you pay directly. And believe me, I wrote a book about this subject. You can see it right there.
Sticking
It's back right there.
behind us.
Sticking
Yeah,
how the
sticking.
government ruined healthcare and how to fix it. So you will when healthcare is expensive, when you go to when insurance is involved,
Mhm.
when you use your free market principles, when you use the free market principles and you pay directly, healthcare is very inexpensive, and you will get the best price, the best quality, and the best service that way.
Mhm.
That's the only way you'll do it. You will not. All three of those things will suffer if you use somebody with insurance. So don't buy into the lie that insurance is better. Don't think that you have good insurance through your employer. There's no such thing as good insurance. There's not. I'm serious. There's no such thing. You want something that works for you, not the insurance company.
The other point I want to make too, and this is something that I feel very strongly about and passionately about, I never tell people what they have to do.
Hmm.
You educate yourself and then you decide what you put inside of your body. And if somebody is pressuring you after all the things that, just take your time.
Yeah.
Take your
And
time and research
right.
yourself and look and ask the questions. Don't feel like you have to do something immediately today.
No.
Perimenopause didn't happen immediately to you, and you're not required to do something strange and crazy
No.
overnight.
There's no
So,
fire.
no,
There's no emergency unless you're bleeding to death.
right.
Don't
Ask
let them sucker you into that.
ask questions. I know we didn't talk a lot about thyroid during this process, but thyroid's another place that can be. You may not even need some of the other hormones, but thyroid might be something that crops up when in your 40s. And many physicians and even endocrinologists do not know how to read the labs for them and to get you at a good place. So do your own research, look for a physician or nurse practitioner or PA that's been practicing hormones. And you know what? Ask around. If you live in a community, ask around. We specialize as a compounding pharmacy, so we see a lot of that in our industry and with our clients. Call and ask a compounding pharmacy in your community. Who do they recommend and why? Ask the questions. Why is this person good? Why would you refer that person to them? I mean, I know that about our providers. I know how they practice, what client might fit better with one practitioner or the other, but we know because we work with them every day. So ask those questions. Go to that pharmacy, call them and say, "Hey, who would you send me to and why?" And then if it's not a good fit, find
Right.
somebody else.
And if the doctor starts making jokes about, oh, where'd you find that out on Dr. Google? Or they
Mhm.
say, just trust me, I'm the doctor, or trust the science, something like that, get a new doctor. I mean, we educate people all day long about hormones. And we might have some bias, and I'll tell people that. It's like, because that's how we make an income is on hormones. And I'll tell people that. So don't trust me. I think I'm doing the best thing and being authentic and being honest. But I tell people, don't trust me. Do your own research. We promote people doing their own research all the time. It is your body. You need to make sure you're doing the right thing for that.
Ask questions and don't be discarded.
Nope. Well, all right. That is the topic of perimenopause. That about wraps that up. I think we're going to go into a little more in depth into perimenopause and approaching postmenopause in our next episode. So stay tuned for that. As always, our goal of this educational series, as is our goal of our podcast and the goal of our pharmacy for 26 years now, is to educate and empower individuals to take charge of their own health. So I hope that you felt that we have reach that goal today. So thank you for listening.